The stars had been quiet for 2,000 years. Humanity had learned to live among them peacefully, trading with alien species, sharing knowledge, and raising their children without fear. It was a golden age that no one wanted to end. Admiral Patricia Cole stood by the window of Orbital Station Horizon,
Out watching the endless dance of cargo ships moving between distant worlds.
She was 62 years old, with silver hair and steady hands that had never fired a weapon in combat. Her grandmother used to tell stories about the last time humans fought anyone. A small battle with pirates near the outer colonies that lasted only 3 weeks. That was the closest thing to war that any living human remembered. Patricia sometimes wondered what it would feel like to face real danger, but she always pushed those thoughts away. Peace was better. Peace was everything. Far below the station, Earth turned slowly in the darkness. 8 billion people lived on that blue world, going about their daily lives without worrying about invasion or attack. They sent their children to school. They planned for the future. They trusted that the galaxy was safe. Senator Daniel Morrison was one of the humans who helped keep that peace. He represented Earth on the Galactic Council, a gathering of 37 species that govern known space. Daniel was a soft-spoken man with gray hair at his temples and kind eyes that made people trust him. When 2 alien ambassadors started shouting at each other over mining rights or trade routes, Daniel was the one who calmed them down. He would invite them to share a meal, listen to both sides, find a solution that made everyone happy. The other species respected Daniel. They called him the peacemaker. They said humanity had grown wise in their centuries among the stars, but not everyone on the council admired humans. Some of the older species remembered what humanity used to be. They had read the ancient reports, the classified files locked away in secret archives. They knew that humans came from a death world, a planet filled with predators and disasters and endless competition for survival. They knew that humans had once been warriors without equal, solving their problems through violence so efficiently that it frightened everyone who witnessed it. High Counselor Vexanar of the Oranthy was one of those who remembered. He was a tall creature with 4 arms and mandibles that clicked when he was thinking. He had ruled the council for 300 years. He had spent much of that time watching humanity with careful eyes. Vexanar did not trust the human smile. He did not believe that predators could become peaceful forever. He thought that one day humanity would remember what they were, and when that day came, no one would be able to stop them. Better to act now, he thought. Better to make sure that day never comes. But these were secret thoughts that Vexanar kept hidden. On the surface, he was friendly to human ambassadors. He praised their trade agreements and their cultural exchanges. He welcomed human observers to council meetings and laughed at their jokes. Meanwhile, in a distant corner of the galaxy, life continued on a small world called New Haven. New Haven was a farming colony that orbited a yellow star in the Kepler sector. It was not a famous place. It did not appear on most star maps. But for the 12,000 humans who lived there, it was home. Sophie Morrison was Daniel's daughter, a woman with brown hair and a warm smile who had chosen a quiet life far from the politics of Earth. She lived in a small house, near the hydroponic gardens with her husband Jack and their 3 children. Lucas was 10 years old and loved building model starships. He would spend hours at the kitchen table, carefully gluing tiny pieces together while telling his mother about the adventures his ships would have. He wanted to be an explorer when he grew up, visiting strange new worlds and meeting alien species. Emma was 8 and had decided she wanted to be a veterinarian for alien animals. She had already read every book she could find about the creatures of different planets. She knew that Velathri sandcats needed special minerals in their diet and that Drenthic waterbirds could recognize over 100 different faces. Noah was the youngest, at 6 years old. He still believed in monsters under the bed and asked his mother to check every night before he would go to sleep. He liked to follow his older brother and sister around, trying to be part of their games, even when they said he was too little. Sophie watched her children grow and felt grateful every day for the peace that protected them. She called her father on the communication screen when she could, showing him how tall the kids were getting, sharing stories about their school projects and their dreams. Daniel always smiled when he saw his grandchildren. They reminded him why his work on the council mattered. Every boring meeting, every difficult negotiation, every hour spent away from his family was worth it if it kept children like Lucas and Emma and Noah safe. The people of New Haven did not worry about danger. Their colony had no weapons, no soldiers, no defense systems. They did not need them. The Galactic Council protected all member worlds. Violence between species had been illegal for centuries. War was a word from history books, something that happened long ago. Two people very different from themselves. The children played in the meadows until the twin suns set. They chased each other through fields of purple grass and climbed trees with silver leaves. They looked up at the stars and wondered which ones they might visit. Someday their parents worked in the gardens and the research stations, growing food and studying the local ecosystem. They built houses and schools and parks. They planned festivals and celebrated birthdays and welcomed new babies into the community. Life was good on New Haven. Life was simple. Life was safe, or so everyone believed, in the halls of the Galactic Council. High Counselor Vexenar was having secret meetings with his most trusted advisors. They spoke in whispers about the human problem, about the danger sleeping inside that seemingly peaceful species. They looked at star charts and identified which human colonies were most vulnerable. New Haven was small and far from Earth. It had no defenses, and no quick way to call for help. It was perfect for what Vexenar had planned. The High Counselor believed he was protecting the galaxy. He believed that stopping humanity now, while they were still soft and weak, was the right thing to do. He did not understand that he was about to make the worst mistake in galactic history. He did not understand that the monsters under the bed were real, and he did not understand that those monsters were not aliens from distant stars. They were the very humans he thought he had tamed. They were sleeping, yes. They had been sleeping for 2,000 years. But some things, once awakened, cannot be put back to sleep. The children of New Haven had 3 more weeks of peace. 3 more weeks of playing in meadows and building model ships and checking for monsters under beds. 3 more weeks of believing that the universe was kind, and that nothing bad could ever happen to. Then the ships came. The morning started. Like any other on New Haven, the twin suns rose over the purple hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Sophie Morrison was making breakfast while her children got ready for school. Lucas was looking for his homework. Emma was brushing her hair. Noah was still in bed, refusing to wake up. It was a Tuesday. Sophie remembered that detail later, when everything else had become a blur of screaming and tears. It was a Tuesday, and she had been worried about nothing more important than weather. Noah would eat his vegetables at lunch. The first sign of trouble came from the communication tower. The colony's main antenna suddenly went dead, cutting off all contact with the rest of human space. The technicians thought it was a simple malfunction at first. These things happen sometimes. They started running diagnostic tests, expecting to have the problem fixed within an hour. They never got the chance. The ships appeared without warning. 47 warships dropped out of hyperspace and surrounded the small colony like wolves circling a lamb. They were Oranthy vessels, painted in the dark purple colors of the Council military, bristling with weapons that the colonists had only seen in history books. Mayor Ruth Campbell tried to contact the fleet, her voice shaking as she spoke into the emergency transmitter. She asked what was happening. She asked if there had been some mistake. She reminded them that New Haven was a peaceful colony, a member of the Galactic Council. Protected by 700 years of treaties and agreements, no one answered. The landing craft came down in the town square, their engines roaring loud enough to wake every sleeping child in the colony. Soldiers poured out in organized lines, their armor gleaming, their weapons raised and ready. They were Oranthy troops, commanded by an officer named Zethral, who had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. The colonists gathered in the streets, confused and frightened. They had no weapons to fight with, no training in combat, no experience with violence of any kind. They stood in small groups, holding their children close, asking questions that no one would answer. Sophie felt a cold fear growing in her stomach as she watched the soldiers spread through the colony. Something was very wrong. The Oranthy were supposed to be allies. The council was supposed to protect them. None of this made any sense. Then the soldiers started scanning faces. They moved through the crowd with handheld devices, checking each person against some kind of database. Adults were pushed aside. Teenagers were ignored. But when the scanner found a child under the age of 12, the soldiers would grab them and pull them toward the waiting transport ships. The screaming started almost immediately. Parents tried to hold on to their children. They begged and pleaded and cried. Some tried to fight, throwing themselves at armored soldiers with nothing but their bare hands. They were knocked down with stun blasts, left twitching on the ground while their sons and daughters were carried away. Sophie saw them coming for her family. 3 soldiers walking toward her house, their scanners already beeping. She grabbed Lucas and Emma and Noah and tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The soldiers were everywhere. The streets were blocked. The sky was full of enemy ships. They caught her at the edge of the garden. The first soldier grabbed Lucas, pulling him away from Sophie's arms with mechanical efficiency. The boy screamed for his mother, reaching back with desperate hands. Emma tried to kick the soldier who took her, but her small feet bounced harmlessly off the armor. Noah just cried, too young to understand what was happening, scared to do anything but call for his mommy. Sophie fought like an animal. She scratched and bit and punched at the soldiers, trying to reach her children. She felt something snap in her wrist when she hit an armored chest plate, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Her babies were being taken from her. A stun blast caught her in the back, and she fell to the ground.
Ow.
Her muscles refusing to obey her commands. She could only watch, paralyzed and helpless, as her children were loaded onto a transport ship along with dozens of others. She could only listen to them crying for her, voices growing fainter as the ship's doors closed. Across the colony, the same nightmare was happening to every family with young children. 347 kids were taken that day. Every single child under the age of 12 on New Haven. Ripped from their parents' arms and carried away into the stars. Commander. Zethrael stood in the town square as the last transport ship lifted off. He looked at the colonists around him, the weeping mothers and the raging fathers and the traumatized teenagers who had watched their younger siblings disappear. He felt no guilt. He was following orders. He was protecting the galaxy. His voice echoed through the officious as he delivered the official message. The children were being relocated to council education facilities. They would be raised properly, taught to serve the greater galactic community. Their dangerous human instincts would be removed through careful training and conditioning. They would become good citizens, loyal to the council, free from the violent nature of their species. This was not punishment, Zethrael explained. This was prevention. This was mercy. The parents should be grateful that their children were being saved from themselves. Then the fleet left. All 47 warships vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a broken colony and hundreds of shattered families. Sophie lay on the ground for a long time, unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything but stare at the empty sky where her children had disappeared. Other parents found her eventually, helped her stand up, wrapped bandages around her broken wrist. Someone fixed the communication antenna. Messages started flying toward Earth, toward the other colonies, toward anyone who would listen. The words were desperate and confused, filled with grief and rage and disbelief. They took our children. The council took our children. Help us. Please help us. Mayor Ruth Campbell sent a direct message to Senator Daniel Morrison. She did not try to soften the news or find diplomatic language. She simply told him the truth. Your grandchildren are gone. Lucas, Emma, and Noah have been taken by the Oranthy. I am so sorry. On Earth, Daniel Morrison was eating dinner when his communication screen lit up with an urgent message. He read the words once, twice, 3 times. The fork fell from his hand. The world seemed to tilt around him. His grandchildren. His beautiful, innocent grandchildren. The ones who called him Grandpa Danny, and showed him their drawings and asked him to tell them stories about the aliens he met. Gone. Daniel stood up slowly, feeling something change inside him. Something old and cold that had been sleeping for a very long time. He did not cry. He did not scream. He simply walked to his office and started making calls. The peace that humanity had built over 1,000 years was about to end, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The news spread across human space like fire through dry grass. Every colony, every station, every ship received the same terrible message. Children had been stolen. The council had broken the peace. And no one knew what would happen next. Admiral Patricia Cole was in her office when the reports arrived. She read them carefully, checking the details again and again, hoping to find some mistake. But there was no mistake. The Oranthy had taken 347 human children from New Haven. They had done it openly. With council warships, following orders from the highest levels of galactic government, Patricia felt something stir in her chest. It was not fear. It was not sadness. It was something older and darker, something that humans had buried deep inside themselves centuries ago. It was rage. Cold, patient, calculating rage that settled into her bones like an old friend. Coming home after a long journey, she had spent her whole life wondering what real danger would feel like. Now, she knew. Senator Daniel Morrison reached the Galactic Council chamber within a day. He traveled faster than any human diplomat had ever traveled before, pushing his ship to its limits, refusing to sleep or eat until he stood before the assembled representatives of 37 species. The chamber was enormous, filled with floating platforms where ambassadors from across the galaxy watched and waited. Daniel stood alone on the human platform, his face pale but his voice steady as he began to speak. He demanded the immediate return of the children. He cited 700 years of treaties, diplomatic agreements, and mutual cooperation pacts. He quoted laws that protected civilian populations and conventions that guaranteed the rights of member species. He reminded the Council of Humanity's centuries of faithful service, their role as peacekeepers and mediators, their contributions to galactic culture and science. The other ambassadors listened in silence. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked away. But none of them spoke in support of humanity. High Counselor Vexenar responded from his elevated throne at the center of the chamber. His four mandibles clicked together in what might have been a smile. The children would be educated, he explained. They would be improved. They would learn to serve the council properly, freed from the violent instincts that made humans so dangerous. This was a gift, not a punishment. Humanity should accept it gracefully and return to their quiet corner of space. The children would not be returned. The decision was final. Daniel looked around the chamber at the representatives of 36 other species. Not one of them objected. Not one of them demanded justice. Not one of them cared that human children had been stolen from their families. He thought of Lucas building his model starships. He thought of Emma reading about alien animals. He thought of Noah asking his mother to check for monsters under the bed. When Daniel spoke again, his voice was different, lower, harder. It was a voice that humans had not used in 2,000 years. Humanity formally requested a declaration of hostilities against the Oranthy sovereignty and any species that supported the abduction. Humanity invoked the right of reclamation under the old laws, the laws that came before the council, the laws written in the blood of 100 extinct civilizations. The chamber fell silent for a long moment. Then Vexenar began to laugh. What would humanity do, he asked, between clicking mandibles? They had no military. They had no weapons. They had no experience with warfare. The Oranthy alone had 10,000 warships and the finest soldiers in the galaxy. Did the humans think they could fight the entire council with cargo ships and farming tools? Other ambassadors joined in the laughter. The Cassari ambassador made a joke about human arrogance. The Velathri representative shook his head in pity. Only a few species remained quiet, watching Daniel with strange expressions on their faces. Daniel did not argue. He did not threaten. He simply turned and walked out of the chamber without another word. On Earth, President Catherine Hayes addressed the global population. She was a former teacher from the Midwest, a woman who had spent her life helping young people learn and grow. She had never raised her voice in anger. She had never spoken about violence or war. But her granddaughter lived on New Haven. Her Granddaughter was one of the children who had been taken. Catherine stood in front of cameras that broadcast her image to every human world, every station, every ship. She spoke for 12 minutes about what had been done to their children. She explained that the council had refused to help. She described the laughter of the alien ambassadors when humanity asked for justice. Then she said the words that changed everything. Humanity was at war. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across human space, people who had never considered violence found themselves ready to fight. Farmers and teachers and scientists and artists, all of them united by a single thought: bring our children home in the mountains of Colorado. Deep beneath the stone, ancient machines began to wake up. These bunkers had been sealed since the era of first contact, hidden from council inspectors, maintained in secret by Genera. Tions of engineers who called themselves the Keepers. They had preserved the knowledge of human warfare. Waiting for the day it might be needed again, that day had come. Admiral Patricia Cole received new orders and a new mission. She was no longer commanding a peacetime observation force. She was now the leader of the Terran Defense Force, and she had 6 million volunteers waiting to serve under her command. The shipyards that had been building cargo vessels and passenger liners started producing something very different. Plans that had been locked in encrypted archives for centuries were decoded and distributed. Factories retooled overnight, working around the clock to create weapons that the galaxy had not seen in 2,000 years, the Council thought. Humanity had abandoned their martial traditions. They thought humans had forgotten how to fight. They thought the soft, peaceful species that traded goods and mediated disputes was all that remained of the ancient predators who had conquered a death world. They were wrong. Humanity had not forgotten anything. They had simply chosen not to remember. They had hidden their strength, buried their weapons, and taught their children that peace was always the better path. But they had also made a promise to themselves, passed down through generations in whispered words and secret ceremonies. If anyone ever threatened their families again, if anyone ever hurt their children, they would remember everything. The Keepers had kept that promise alive for 2,000 years. Now they were sharing their knowledge with anyone who wanted to learn, and everyone wanted to learn. Patricia looked at the reports flooding into her office. Volunteers arriving by the million. Factories producing weapons faster than expected. Ships being constructed in orbit around a dozen worlds. Scientists rediscovering technologies that had been classified for centuries. Humanity was waking up, and when they were finished, the galaxy would never be the same. The first Terran warship launched 3 weeks after the declaration of war. It was called the Retribution, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in living memory. The ship was 3 kilometers long. It's built with dark metal that seemed to swallow light. Weapons covered every surface, from the massive cannons that ran along the spine to the smaller turrets that dotted the hull like angry eyes. The engines alone produced more power than most species used for their entire fleets. Captain Nathan Price stood on the bridge as the Retribution lifted away from Earth orbit. He was 45 years old, with short gray hair and a calm face that showed no emotion. Like everyone in the new Terran Defense Force, he had trained on simulators his entire life without knowing why. His parents had told him it was just a hobby, a way to honor the old traditions. Now, he understood the truth. The simulators had been preparing him for exactly this moment, around the Retribution. More ships were launching every day. Destroyers and cruisers and carriers. All of them crewed by humans who had spent their lives practicing for a war they never expected to fight. They moved with precision and discipline, forming into fleets that swept outward from human space like a tide of steel and fire. The Council watched in disbelief. Their spies sent frantic reports about human military production, about the ships appearing faster than anyone thought possible, about weapons that seemed to break the laws of physics. The alien ambassadors who had laughed at Senator Morrison were no longer laughing. High Counselor Vexenar ordered the Orinthi fleet to intercept the humans before they could reach any important targets. He sent 3,000 warships, the finest in the galaxy, commanded by the legendary Admiral Kethfer, who had never lost a battle in 200 years of service. Kethfer was confident as his fleet approached the Vega system where the humans were gathering. He had studied the ancient reports about human warfare, but he did not believe them. Those stories were exaggerated, written by species who had been surprised by primitive aggression. The modern humans were soft and weak, unused to real combat. They would break at the first sign of resistance. The battle began at dawn. Terran Standard Time. The human fleet numbered only 400 ships against the Orenthius 3,000. Any reasonable observer would have predicted a quick victory for the Council forces. Any reasonable observer would have been completely wrong. The Terran ships moved like nothing Cuthbert had ever seen. They worked together in perfect coordination, anticipating each other's movements, covering weaknesses, and exploiting openings with mechanical precision. Their weapons struck with devastating accuracy, punching through shields that should have been impenetrable, tearing apart armor that had never been breached before. Within the first hour, the Orenthi lost 500 ships. Cuthbert ordered new formations, new strategies, new approaches. Each one failed. The humans seemed to know what he would do before he did it, responding to his tactics with countermeasures that made his best officers look like children playing at war. The Terran fleet did not charge wildly into battle. They did not take unnecessary risks or waste resources on flashy maneuvers. They fought with cold, methodical efficiency, choosing their targets carefully, managing their ammunition and energy supplies, rotating damaged ships to the rear while fresh ones took their place. This was not the berserker rage that Cuthbert had expected. This was something far more terrifying. This was the work of a species that had perfected the art of war over thousands of generations, then spent 2,000 years analyzing and improving their methods in secret. Admiral. Cuthbert sent a desperate message to High Counselor Vexenar as his fleet crumbled around him. He described what he was seeing, the precision and discipline and devastating effectiveness of the human forces. He warned that the Council had made a terrible mistake, that the species they thought they had tamed was something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. His transmission cut off. Mid-sentence, when a Terran missile found his flagship, the battle lasted for hours. When it ended, not a single Orenthi vessel remained functional. Some had been destroyed outright. Others had been disabled and left drifting in space, their crews alive but helpless. The humans had captured rather than killed whenever possible, taking prisoners instead of corpses. The Terran fleet had lost 11 ships, Captain. Lisa Grant commanded the destroyer Vengeance, which had taken heavy damage during the engagement. Her ship was leaking atmosphere from a dozen breaches. She had lost friends, crew members she had known for years, people who had trusted her to lead them safely through the battle. She stood on her damaged bridge and recorded a message for the Galactic Council. Her face was bruised and her uniform was torn, but her voice was calm, almost gentle. Return the children. This is the only warning. The message spread across the galaxy within hours. Every species saw the footage from the Battle of Vega. They saw the mighty Orenthi fleet reduced to drifting wreckage. They saw the human ships moving through the debris field, rescuing survivors and treating wounded enemies. They saw Captain Grant's steady eyes and heard her quiet words. Some species, immediately, withdrew their support for the Council's actions. They sent private messages to Earth, apologizing for not speaking up earlier, offering to help negotiate a peace. They understood now that the humans they had dismissed as harmless were anything but. Other species doubled down on their resistance. They sent reinforcements to the Orenthi, hoping that numbers would eventually overwhelm the Terran forces. They believed that even the most dangerous predator could be brought down by enough hunters working together. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Terran fleet swept through Council space like a scalpel, cutting out a disease. They attacked military installations and shipyards, destroying the ability to wage war. But they did not touch civilian populations. They did not bomb cities or poison water supplies or commit any of the atrocities that war usually brought. They were not here for revenge. They were not here for conquest. They were here for their children, and they would accept nothing less than complete success. Admiral Patricia Cole coordinated the campaign from her flagship, the carrier Resolution. She worked around the clock, managing dozens of simultaneous operations, adjusting strategies as new information arrived, always pushing forward toward the single goal that mattered. Find the children. Bring them home. The galaxy had woken up something it did not understand, and now it was learning what happened when humanity went to war. The war lasted 6 months. In that time, humanity dismantled the military power of the Orinthi sovereignty and broke the authority of the Galactic Council. They captured hundreds of installations, defeated a dozen fleets, and forced the surrender of species that had bullied the galaxy for thousands of years. But it was not their weapons that truly broke their enemies. It was their mercy. When Terran forces captured the Orinthi homeworld, they did not bombard it from orbit. They did not release plagues or poison the oceans, or do any of the terrible things that conquering armies had done throughout history. Instead, they landed ground troops, secured the government facilities, and announced that civilian life would continue without interruption. The Orinthi people had expected extinction. They had been told that humans were monsters who would slaughter everyone they found. When the Terran soldiers started helping repair damaged buildings and distribute food to hungry families, the Orinthi did not know how to respond. Admiral Patricia Cole walked through the streets of the Orinthi capital city, surrounded by her guards, but never threatened by the civilians who watched her pass. She was looking for High Counselor Vexenar, the architect of the child abduction, the leader who had thought he could break humanity by stealing their young. They found him in his private bunker beneath the government palace. He was surrounded by treasures stolen from a dozen conquered species, artwork and artifacts that represented centuries of council domination. He sat on a golden throne, waiting for the death he was certain would come. Patricia stood before him, her weathered face showing nothing but patience. She did not shout or threaten. She did not gloat over her victory. She simply asked one question. The children. Where are they? Vexenar looked at the human admiral and finally understood his mistake. He had read the old reports about human warfare. He had studied their capacity for violence, their skill at killing, their ruthless efficiency in battle. But he had missed the most important part of the story. Humans did not fight for pleasure. They did not wage war for profit or glory or power. They fought for their families, for their children, for the people they loved. And when they fought for those reasons, they were absolutely unstoppable. He had thought he could tame humanity by taking their young. Instead, he had awakened something that would never sleep again. Vexenar told them everything. The children were being held on a moon base in the Cygnus sector, guarded by a small force of Orinthi soldiers who had been ordered to resist any rescue attempt. He gave them the access codes, the security protocols, the layout of the facility. He held nothing back. Admiral Cole sent the fastest ships in the fleet to Cygnus. They arrived to find the guards already surrendering, their weapons on the ground, their hands raised in the air. They had seen what happened to every force that tried to resist the humans. They had no desire to join the list of the defeated. Sophie Morrison was on the first shuttle to land. She had spent 6 months waiting for this moment. 6 months of not knowing if her children were alive or dead. 6 months of watching the war reports and praying that the Terran forces would reach the moon base before anything happened to Lucas and Emma and Noah. The shuttle doors opened, and Sophie ran. She did not wait for the soldiers to secure the area. She did not care about safety protocols or proper procedures. She ran through the corridors of the base, calling her children's names. Her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She found them in a large room with 200 other children. They were thin and scared and confused, but they were alive. They were whole. They were safe. Lucas saw her first. He shouted for his mom and ran toward her, crashing into her arms with enough force to knock her backward. Emma followed a second later, crying and laughing at the same time. Noah came last, too young to fully understand what had happened, but old enough to know that his mother was here and everything would be okay. Sophie held her children while they cried. She held them while the soldiers cried. She held them while parents arrived from across the base, finding their own sons and daughters, creating a symphony of reunion that echoed through the metal corridors. 347 children returned to New Haven within the week. Not one had been permanently harmed. The Orinthi had fed them and housed them and even educated them, planning for a future that would never come. The children had nightmares for months afterward, but they also had their families, and that made all the difference. Senator Daniel Morrison addressed the Galactic Council one final time. Standing in the same chamber where he had been laughed at 6 months before, the seats were much emptier now. Many species had withdrawn from council business entirely. The Orinthi delegation sat in silence, their heads bowed. Their power broken, Daniel spoke quietly about what would happen next. The Orinthi leadership would face trial for their crimes. The council would be restructured to prevent such abuses from occurring again. New laws would protect all species from kidnapping and forced relocation, and humanity would return to its peaceful ways. They would go back to farming and trading and raising their children in safety. They would not seek revenge or demand territory or try to dominate the galaxy as others had done, but they would never hide their strength again. They would never pretend to be helpless. They would stand as a reminder to every species in the galaxy that some lines must never be crossed. Vexenar, sentenced to exile on a barren world, stripped of his power and his treasures, left to spend his remaining years contemplating his mistakes. It was a mercy that he did not deserve, but the humans gave it to him anyway. They were not interested in creating more suffering. They simply wanted to make sure nothing like this could ever happen again. On New Haven, life slowly returned to normal. The hydroponic gardens produced food again. The schools reopened. Children played in the meadows, though they did not wander as far from home as they once had. Lucas finished building his model starship collection. He now dreamed of joining the Terran Defense Force when he grew up, protecting other children from the dangers his parents had protected him from. Emma still wanted to work with alien animals, but she also studied medicine, wanting to heal the wounds that war left behind. Noah stopped believing in monsters under his bed. The real monsters, he had learned, were much bigger. And so were the heroes who fought them. Sophie stood on the porch of her small house, watching her children play while the twin suns set over the purple hills. Her father stood beside her, visiting from Earth for the first time since the war ended. Daniel put his arm around his daughter and watched. His grandchildren laughed in the fading light. The galaxy was different now. Humanity was different now. The long peace had been broken, but something better had taken its place. A peace built not on forgetting, but on remembering. A peace that came from strength, not weakness. The stars were quiet again. And this time, everyone understood why. Not because humanity had forgotten how to fight, but because no one wanted to give them a reason to remember.